All right, get ready for this, because we're about to dive into a truly mind-bending idea. We're going to explore a framework that suggests the fundamental rules for a star, a human thought, and an entire society might actually be the exact same rules. It's a bold attempt at a unified theory of, well, pretty much everything.
I mean, it sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? What could possibly connect the physics of the cosmos with the biology inside our own heads and the huge, complex dynamics of our world? They feel like completely separate things, operating on totally different principles.
But what if they're not separate at all? The core idea we're digging into today is that all of these systems, when you get right down to it, are governed by the same elegant set of rules. Think of it like a universal dance of flow, balance, and structure.
Okay, to really get this, we need to understand the building blocks of this whole framework. Let's think of them as three fundamental axes, kind of like a universal rulebook that defines how things change and find their stability.
So, the first one is the energy axis. This is a concept straight out of physics, that constant trade-off between stored, potential energy and active, kinetic energy. But here's the brilliant leap. You can think of this as the balance between a stored memory and the action of actually recalling it. It's this universal balance between what could happen and what is happening right now.
Next up, we have the momentum axis. This is all about the balance of direction. Is the system's flow coherent and aligned, all moving together? Or is it just a mess of conflicting, chaotic forces pushing against each other? In human terms, it's the difference between a team that's in perfect sync versus a group that's totally locked in conflict.
And now for the really new piece of the puzzle, the BKM axis. This comes from something called the Brain Kinematics Model. It balances three key things: structure, which is the static shape of a system; change, the dynamic motion inside it; and integration, the continuum that holds the whole thing together. So it's the balance between what something is, what it does, and what makes it a single, unified thing.
So, we've got our three axes. Now, what's really fascinating is what happens when you put them all together. They create this kind of conceptual map, a 3D space, where you can locate, well, literally, any system.
And that's the whole idea behind this 3D balanced space. By figuring out where a system sits on the energy, momentum, and BKM axes, you can actually plot its state. A memory, a decision, a stock market crash, you can see them all as a moving point, a path, through this universal space.
And this just brilliantly illustrates what different spots on that map really mean. So for example, what if you have a system with low active energy but a whole lot of stable structure? Well, that's basically a stored memory. What about high energy and perfectly aligned momentum? That's focused action, like an athlete in the zone. And a state of low momentum balance, where all the forces are chaotic, that's conflict, that's confusion. See how it works?
Okay, so we have a map for the state of any system, but what actually makes it move? What's the engine that drives all of this change? According to this framework, it all comes down to a single, universal rule of flow. This quote from the source material is the absolute key. It's the whole engine in a single sentence. Everything, from a river to a thought, is a flow. That flow is guided and shaped by some kind of structure, and it always loses a little bit of energy along the way to friction or inefficiency. We call that dissipation.
To make this super clear, let's use this amazing analogy, the river of reality. The state is just the water itself. It could be energy, an idea, or social influence. The flow is the current that carries it. The constraint, and this is crucial, is the riverbanks. These could be the laws of physics, the structure of your memory, or social laws. They're what guide where the water can go. And dissipation? Well, that's just the friction and little eddies that naturally slow the river down.
And that's it. That's the whole dynamic. Whether you are talking about electricity moving through a wire, a thought moving through your brain, or capital moving through an economy, this framework argues it's all the same fundamental process. A flow shaped by a structure and slowed down by loss.
So if we have one set of axes and one single rule of flow, what's the grand payoff? What's the point? It's the ability to see the exact same underlying pattern playing out in completely different worlds.
And here it is. This is the big aha moment. This is the continuum translation matrix. Just look at this. Take the rho for constraint. In physics, it's a potential field. In the brain, it's your memory. In cognition, it's your existing knowledge. And in society, it's institutions like laws and customs. It's the same functional role, just wearing a different costume in each domain. This is really the heart of the whole idea.
Let's make this really concrete with an example. How we see the world.
You know, the old model was super simple. Light comes in, the brain processes it, and boom, we see. But this framework gives us a much more dynamic and, frankly, more interesting picture. Perception isn't just a simple input-output thing.
And this visual just illustrates that new model perfectly. You can see the information from the eye flowing like a river, but it doesn't just go wherever it wants. No, it pours into these pre-existing riverbanks, the structured neural pathways of your visual cortex. And those pathways act as a filter that's been carved out by everything you've ever seen before. So what you finally see is the result of that incoming flow being guided and shaped by the constraints of your own memory. It's incredible.
So here's the biggest takeaway. When we notice similarities between a flowing river, a firing brain, and a functioning society, it might not just be a nice analogy, it might be the exact same fundamental pattern of constrained flow, just showing up at wildly different scales of reality. And that leaves us with this final, massive question to chew on. If the very same rules that shape the universe also shape the way we think and the societies we build, what does that tell us about our place in all of this? Are we just one of the most complex expressions of a universal tendency for reality to flow, to balance, and to build? Pretty amazing stuff to think about.